brain doesn't expect, it knows. In parallel computation, not expectation logic. I joined as one of the founding directors of the Robotics Institute at Carnegie Mellon University, not because I liked robots, but because of the opportunity to practice my theoretical and empirical science. And I was right. I discovered most everybody else's ideas about how neural systems compute were wrong. At that time, around 1980, I was given the opportunity to direct what was called the Inspection Laboratory. This was one of the 6 laboratories that constituted the Robotics Institute. At the time, nearly all work in robotics was about commercial product manufacturing. Our job was to look at existing manufacturing operations throughout the world and improve their efficiency using electronic models of perception, reasoning, and action with artificial intelligence and human brain computational modeling. The inspection lab's job was to replace human product quality inspection and implement the robots that could perceive, reason, and act to spot and remove the bad product that comes from any mechanical or human manufacturing system. Since I am a computational cognitive neuroscientist, my interest in automating inspection was that I had a built-in, paid-for, job studying and modeling highly skilled human quality inspection from simple products like screws to complex ones like automobiles and television sets. A perfect job for a theoretical empiricist interested in highly skilled human perception and reasoning. I made the most of it for over 20 years. After dozens of studies inventing and implementing real systems to solve real problems in quality inspection, and comparing my systems to empirically observable human capabilities, I changed my mind completely as to how the human brain computes. More recently, I encountered yet another domain of empirical investigation that also, quite dramatically, proved our old AI ideas were wrong and our understanding of human brain computation was wrong, fundamentally. And, most importantly, we could see very clearly the shape of the right scientific answer. This domain of investigation is into human lying and deceit, which I have since called mendatiology. To keep this article short, I hope to convince you with a couple of narratives. From these, you should be able to confirm for yourself of the truth of my conclusions, without any particular expertise in my field of interest. I will get to the difference between expectation computation and knowledge computation later. O-rings. This was a military contract. I always refuse to do any classified work simply because I do my work as a scientist who believes in open science. But most people do not know the story behind O-rings and why the military funded O-ring manufacturing. O-rings are simply little donut-shaped pieces of rubber or other plastic that seal circular connectors from leakage. They are technically toruses, simple cylinders wrapped in a circle. Their effectiveness as seals is astounding. The cavity that holds them must be square, not round, and they do not have to be carefully placed in the cavity. The physics is not hard to understand, since it is just about force trying to cause a leak around the torus and how the edges of the torus form a seal tightly with those forces. The military makes lots of unique devices that need unique O-rings in large numbers by commercial standards, but their quality needs for good O-rings can be beyond what is needed commercially. So they fund special contracts to commercial factories with specific standards defined in military specifications. Mil-specs are usually public documents. The problem is that manufacturing is always subject to errors that can lead to non-perfect toruses. So manufacturer quality control engineers had learned to require 100% human inspection of their O-rings against the mil-specs. They learned by experience that wherever they had manufacturing, there were local housewives looking for some part-time work in company with other local housewives. The manufacturer's quality control managers told me at every manufacturing facility I visited that even though they agreed to inspect against the mil-specs, they should never tell the women. They simply told them to look at every O-ring moving fresh out of the casting machine and throw it in the trash if it looked bad. This was perfect for my science. The human brain can just look at hundreds of simple things and tell whether one O-ring in a bunch was not right, extremely quickly with minimal oversight and training. Notably, they would even be perceiving and acting or not acting on perhaps at a few hundred every few minutes. In other words, their brains would be computing on many toruses for perfection simultaneously. A bad O-ring would trigger their attention somehow, and they would know how to pick it up and throw it in the trash from among the many traveling past them. Most also used their hands to spread the O-rings out if they overlapped. Given what we already know about human attention shifting and human brain computation times for perception, reasoning, and action, this is astounding rates of parallel computation. Think of brain computation as if it has an attentional and action clock speed of about 20 clock cycles a second at maximum, but they were demonstrating computations in the many thousands if not millions a second. We can count millions for just reading and comprehending one simple sentence. Furthermore, the computational decision-making would result in specific motions of their eyes down to their arms and fingers, while perhaps making small talk among their coworkers. We know from our models of brain computation that predict this is possible, that this requires specific hierarchicalization of predicates so as to make sure the perceptions were sure and the motions were sure, and fast. What of the mil-specs? They were not worthless because quality control could do measurements of samples sent to their lab. Also, mil-specs are essential for manufacturing engineering to design the fabrication and handling machinery. But for real-time quality control by the humans, the mil-specs were not useful. The human nervous system could compute and detect faults in the O-rings, in terms of all the ways that an O-ring could fail, even if they actually still met the mil-specs. I spent considerable time with the ladies, as well as the QC engineers in several factories that produced O-rings. Ladies were of course tested, but this was for their eyesight, and as everyone would say, some people were just good at the job having only been told to throw out the bad-looking O-rings. They were invariantly pleasant with the other ladies, with the manufacturing engineers who knew how to tweak the machinery. That's how they got and kept their jobs. My job was to build automated inspection devices that could perform at human levels. Back then in the 1990s, even though we understood how to do the proper computation based on machine learning, perception, and action, the computing hardware limited the utility of the machines. And the machines we built, even though they assisted the ladies in throwing out some bad O-rings, they were never good enough to throw out the ladies or the QC engineers. That may be changing today, but the ladies could use the more computationally correct AI models of human computation as further assistance and therefore much higher in productivity. The AI today almost certainly could cull a lot more of the O-rings correctly, but also dialogue with the ladies and QC engineers in natural language to further improve production quality. Indeed, the ladies could step up to the levels of QC engineers with AI assistance, and the QC engineers could step up to design engineers with modern AI assistance. But this is the thing. The humans must always be the responsible parties. Humans are the ultimate customers of the products needed by the humans. In manufacturing, there is no lack of problems to solve, just a lack of humans to take responsibility for solving the problems and interacting with other responsible humans talking to each other in their natural languages. My AI machine vision systems increased productivity, which only increased the business opportunities for the humans. Many AI people still believe that brain computations are expectation computations, but posing, verifying, and taking action on expectations is impossibly slow to account for how brains actually compute. Rather, as we see with modern AI LLMs, the basic processing is massively parallel processing, read out and read in based hierarchicalization and dehierarchicalization working cooperatively to serialize attention and behavior. A case could be made that Tesla's Optimus robot could do what the women were doing, but it will be a long time before they have the enormous parallel computational capacity for such apparently simple tasks at the speeds and effectiveness these women routinely demonstrated. Humans have to take responsibility. The need for humans to be responsible for the AI automation they use does not go away. A single housewife working part-time might own 10 Optimi robots, doing the best they can, but may step in when the Optimi are too slow or not doing as much of the right things as the humans need to do. Divisive lies. More than 20 years later, I was still studying the computational cognitive neuroscience of what humans' brains do for a living. I stumbled on another area of study, where you could expressly and directly observe the massive parallel processing in the human nervous system, and to decode the computations sufficient to model them with modern AI machines. In fact, this area has proven richer in terms of exposing how living neural systems compute for all animals as well as humans. I had long argued that human natural language is the best window on neural computation. First, it is observable. Second, we can observe directly what the natural language says. The word is a word. That is an example of such a direct scientific behavioral observation that cannot be denied by a real scientist. We had learned from all our studies that neural systems intuit truth and rarely prove truth. Although they can observe causation and thereby know truth, they may otherwise intuit. The Darwinian winning system was a highly parallel, speedy way to guess truth and deceit, even when truth or deceit does not have the direct perception of the proof of either. We say the fundamental computation we can clearly, directly, and empirically observe is in human natural language communication, truth and lies. But lies, deceit, has been largely overlooked in computational cognitive science. Yet, it has essentially the same survival value as intuited truth. And we see the same massive computational parallelism, as we saw clearly in human product inspection years earlier, but with greater clarity of detail as carried in natural language itself. For example, any human can quickly learn to do predication analysis that their brains can be directly observed as computing. Many of us were taught this in our English or other natural language high school classes. We were taught how to grammatically diagram sentences. This did not involve deep or difficult reasoning, as did logical proofs of truth or deceit. In these hierarchical graphs of sentences is directly observable evidence that people rapidly hierarchicalize and de-hierarchicalize knowledge at all levels and areas of brain computation. This is for the sake of deserializing and serializing propositional knowledge in natural language communication. This brain computation is based on knowledge, the organization of memory in the brain, and not expectation reasoning. A major consequence of our modern scientific understanding of neural computations is that not only is truth normally intuited, not proven, but lies and deceit are inevitable communication tools in such computations as well. In other words, every child, every animal, experiments with recognizing truth and recognizing and producing deceit as well. In a world that moves too fast for every premise to be observed directly to be proven true, the neural system rapidly, inevitably, necessarily, and sufficiently also can perceive and produce deceit. This is special. It is life or death, and why neural systems exist in the Darwinian understanding of what it means to be an animal or a human. Humans evolved natural language as the most direct way in which one nervous system can communicate with another of the same species to promote the survival of the species itself. And this can be observed as a hierarchicalization of predications, subjects, and predicates, as we see in grammatical hierarchies of surface, observed, words and inflections in sentences and across them, in narratives and other communication structures. This includes, by the way, math and programming, both of which can deceive by their very neuronal nature. I have called this computational cognitive neuroscience of lying and deceit, Mendesiology, because it deserves a name in its own study, just as we also study how neuronal systems can compute and communicate truth in word and action. So what is the parallel to O-ring inspection? Speed of processing and detection and interpretation of the unexpected. These empirical realities damn earlier computer models of brain computation such as Turing or von Neumann machines as being accurate explanations of how animal neural systems most fundamentally compute, and why we can expect any alien intelligence to evolve essentially predication-based hierarchical intuited truth and deceit. It predicts we should be able to communicate our brains to alien brains that can operate in the same speed regimes as our brains can operate in intuiting and creating truths and deceits. But the distance to alien civilizations is likely to be so vast that this hypothesis cannot ever be tested just because it depends on communication speeds impossible across the large distances in outer space. It does also predict, however, that humans and animals could and do understand each other in vastly less rich ways, much as a person who speaks one natural language cannot communicate in natural language with a person who speaks another natural language. I believe this hypothesis can be tested to demonstrate this knowledge processing across species, just as we know it within species when a common human natural language is not available for communication. Interestingly, AI may solve that problem for dogs and other animals that we may, eventually, be able to communicate what they are thinking precisely because our brains do compute essentially the same way whether man or dog, bird or cat, truth or deception. But humans will survive among AI robots if our laws require AI robots assist responsible humans who have the social responsibility for what their robots can perceive, think, and do. If a robot can steal someone's car, it must have an owner, just like the car it stole. The new laws we need for our artificial human brains must require that they be used for human assistance, and human is always responsible for what their tool does. This is not new. Parents are responsible for what their children do. Managers are responsible for what their employees do. Without that law, the artificial intelligence we now have almost surely will remove humans as unnecessary to their happiness. This is precisely because modern AI, which we've understood computationally for almost 50 years now, is just creating artificial human intelligence unlike the computers we grew up with. But it is superhuman precisely because our neuronal memories don't work like their electronic memories, so they must be our assistants that we own and not the responsible agents they may want to be. Even the poorest human should have superhuman assistance on hand whenever they desire it, but they must be the responsible party in other interactions with other humans, just like what happened with O-ring automation. Evidence for the knowledge processing hypothesis for neural computation is further explained here. How your brain computes. It's simple but deceivingly clever. Medium.com. And it turns out to predict consciousness as an inevitable property of any sufficiently complex natural living neural system such as a brain. Consciousness figured out. It's confirming you are doing something. Medium.com.